Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. And we want you to share your opinions and your comments with us. Just go to facebook.com/MPB Online News. On Twitter, our handle is @MPB News. Also visit our webpage, mpbonline.org/issue. At issue tonight, election upset. The voters have decided that Republican businessman Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. Trump defeated his Democratic challenger, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Let's take a look at the vote totals. When we look at the Electoral College map, Trump won more than the 270 votes needed to win the White House. Trump carried Ohio, Texas, and Florida, and an overwhelming majority of the southern states. Clinton's only big state win was California. But in terms of the popular vote, the two were neck and neck. Clinton about 200,000 votes ahead of Trump. Here are the candidates after the election: Clinton conceding and Trump claiming victory.
Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. Have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country. I hope that he will be a successful president for all Americans. We have seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought. But I still believe in America, and I always will.
Here in Mississippi, Trump defeated Clinton by a wide margin, 58% to 40%, enough to claim the state's 6 electoral votes. Here's Governor Phil Bryant, who was a strong Trump supporter, on the Republican victory.
It would be all too easy to feel vindicated and boastful. But President-elect Trump has called on us to be a people united. As governor of this great state, I will heed those words and ask all Mississippians to come together as one today. As citizens of this nation, we must be united in civility and in trust. We must be united in accepting the results of this historic election and its true potential. This is our opportunity to join the next president in making America great again.
Let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the Mississippi House of Representatives. Austin Barbour is a Republican national strategist. He's the founding partner of the Clearwater Group. Austin, Brandon, good to have you back with us on this other side of the election now. Last week at this time, you both sat here. You both predicted that Trump would win Mississippi, but that Clinton would take the presidency. You were both wrong, as were almost every other person out there who does this for a living. Austin, you had to have been surprised with the outcome.
Well, first let me say, it's my job to try to project winners, and boy did I fail on this one. I thought that Hillary was the favorite going into Election Day. But clearly, the American voters had something else different in store. Listen, the polls were massively wrong. It's so hard when you're polling to try to project turnout on a national level. It was wrong in 2012, they were wrong in 2000, and obviously they were massively wrong here in 2016. So, they were off. Our projections were wrong. Of course, we said he was going to win Mississippi. That was an easy one to see. But look, Donald Trump ran his own type campaign, and it was a massive success in the primary, and it was a massive success in the general. He pulled off probably the largest upset in political history, certainly in modern political history.
Brandon, you had to have been surprised.
Well, I think we need to check the game tape. I think I had this one called pretty close. I'm kidding. It was
we
rough.
can do that.
I mean, no, you don't pick Middle Tennessee State over Alabama, and you don't pick this Trump campaign over the Clinton campaign. This was a strange moment. It was bewildering. Here we are days later, still kind of sinking in. And so it was unusual, but I think you do have to give credit where it's due. I mean, despite all of our critique and all of our different takes on his campaign, he did the job, and he clearly activated. I think when we're looking at all the data, one of the data points that really sticks out to me is 40% white working class is what they constituted 40% of the overall vote total. That's a big share. That's a big vote share. And that tells me that he was speaking to something. And I think going into this thing, we mentioned last week, there was certainly an anger quotient, that he had tapped into that. I think what we have to say now is that anger quotient was a lot bigger than we thought it was. People were perhaps more angry than maybe we even anticipated. And what they wanted was change. Now, I didn't know they were going to take an Etch-a-Sketch to American government, but clearly that's the kind of overriding, overwhelming change they wanted.
Yeah, and I don't know if angry is the right way to define it more, or if they were just sort of sick of politics as usual in Washington. They were.
Well, they don't have that anymore.
No, they do not. And listen, we have to congratulate Senator Roger Wicker, my former boss, who, of course, ran the National Republican Senatorial Committee, was the chairman of the Senatorial Committee, I should say, and guided the Republicans to the ability to hang on to the majority. I think it's going to end up being 53-47, maybe 52-48. It's a great victory for Senator Wicker. Certainly continues to increase his status and ability and seniority to get things done for Mississippians in Washington, and that's a good thing.
Brandon, what are Democrats saying after all this? How do they feel? Is it the end of the world? What are you hearing?
Secretary Clinton struck the right tone in her conciliatory remarks. She struck the right tone, and she did what she said she thought the position required, which was peaceful transfer of power. We have to get behind the person who was elected. I think the president has tried to strike that same tone and will continue to. You've seen senators, even including some of those who are the most outspoken critics of Mr. Trump, such as Senator Warren, say some things that seem nice. So, I mean, I think that's the attitude to take, and I think that's the one they're taking. Now, you know, there still are things that Democrats believe in. The Democratic Party is still robust throughout the country. We had a very tough night on Tuesday, but I think that they'll still be there to try to beat the drum for the working class and for health care for all and for better educational opportunities for kids living in places that are more rural. But in this transitional time, the important thing to do is to be supportive and respect the results, and that's what we're going to do.
I think President-elect Trump set the right tone on election night. It may have been 3 o'clock in the morning when we were actually watching his speech, but his tone was pitch perfect. It really was. I actually even thought he was a little humbled, as most people would do. But he was humbled, he was grateful, he was gracious, and he said, listen, I want to be president for all Americans. I want to be president for those who live in the inner cities and those who live in rural America. I want to go get things done for America. And I think that really set the right tone for everyone, for Republicans who were with him, who were with him passionately, Republicans who were with him but were a little nervous about it, and for Democrats who were passionately against him. To hear him come out and say, I want to go get things done, and not, hey, I beat you and you lost. You know, I think that was a big moment for President-elect Trump, and I'm very happy the way he handled it.
I was a mischievous fifth grader, and I got partnered up with a kid that was really good at school, and I remember I was cutting up, and his mom came into the room and said, now, Brandon, Tim's going to make an A. I don't know what you're going to make. And I said, well, ma'am, it's a group project. I think we're going to both get the same grade. Same thing applies here. The Republican Party doesn't get to experience some type of lifestyle and success that the rest of the party does, the rest of the country doesn't experience. We don't do these things in part. The same folks who voted for Hillary Clinton in the inner city share the country with the rural folks that voted for Trump out in the country. So we got to do this together. I mentioned it last week, but I think it bears repeating. George Bush said to Clinton, your victories are our victories. And certainly that's the attitude we should take. I want him to be better at this job than I think he will be, and I'm pulling for that.
I think he will be.
The Cole comments notwithstanding, how much of this was about the candidate more than it was about the message that candidate was delivering? If we had had a different candidate than Hillary Clinton delivering the same message for the Democrats, someone other than Donald Trump delivering the same message for the Republicans, would we have a different outcome?
Well, listen, it's almost impossible to answer that, but I'm going to try to do the best I possibly can. Donald Trump was the perfect candidate for 2016, okay? he had this built-in approval, maybe not name recognition through all facets of, different types of people across the country because of the Celebrity Apprentice show. So here's this guy that and you feel like from that show that he's big persona, big successful businessman. And what Republican voters or independents or moderate Dems in places like Pennsylvania, Ohio, what they were looking for was to see something different happen in Washington, D.C., okay? They were sick and tired of the way that they felt like their life had changed in the past 10 to 20 years. And Donald Trump was the right person, big, broad shoulders, would go and say anything that he sort of felt like he needed to say. And that was very refreshing for a lot of voters. I just think the timing was perfect for him. He's thought about running for president a lot. Boy, did he wait to the right time. And again, it is amazing. But it was just the perfect time for him to run for president. And the mood of the country was right for him.
I haven't quite got to the acceptance phase on the grief scale, so I'm still wrestling with it, Austin. But a lot of what you said, I think, is going to be proven to be the case. I think when I think about the candidates for this race, the main thing that comes to mind is we were guessing that there was a slight sense of change among the electorate. This was a change election. It's a change election. Donald Trump, in the course of 10 months, effectively took down the two biggest houses in the entire political world in the United States, the Bush house and the Clinton house. If you were tired of politics as usual, if you were tired of the last 30 years of politics, Donald Trump just wiped clean the slate, the biggest Republican family and the biggest Democratic family, and made them footnotes in history, and now we're moving on into something different.
And I worked on Governor Bush's campaign in the primary, as well as Governor Perry's from Texas, and there's no question about it. He completely wiped him off the map. He was, I can't even find the best description of what a phenomenon he was in the primary, and then it just kept growing. And look, what I applaud them is, and I thought they were making a mistake. I thought they were making a mistake in terms of how they were running their campaign, of the Trump campaign, of really not worried. They weren't focusing as much about the blocking and tackling of door-to-door, get-out-the-vote efforts. But they had this mentality, which obviously was correct. We're going to go do huge events. We're going to let our candidate be himself. We're going to get tons and tons of earned media. We're going to take advantage of talk radio and social media, and that's how we're going to build. That's how we're going to build our electorate. That's how we're going to build our base of support. And they knew that, and we all knew, but they knew Hillary Clinton was a flawed candidate. Nobody could have procrastinated that she was going to get 5 million votes less than Barack Obama
in that sense, you can't replicate that.
No.
Like, you have to think, in many ways, these campaigns were 30 years in the making, both for Trump and for Clinton. I mean, Clinton has dedicated her life to public service, has been in the public spotlight for a long time, has been building a resume, and clearly had some ideas about what she wanted to do next at each step of the way. Of course, there was also a cottage industry that grew up around her. As we mentioned before, you probably wouldn't know Rush Limbaugh. You probably wouldn't know who Matt Drudge is were it not for the Clintons. So that was kind of well healed. But Donald Trump, look, he has been making the front page of the New York Daily News for 3 decades now, ever since his first deal. And he has manipulated that. And I don't mean that in a completely crass way.
He's been smart.
He's been very smart. I mean, it's very much a modern P.T. Barnum in terms of the way that you control the way people look at you and you control the media. It's a wildly successful show. I don't know that another candidate could step in and say, we're going to follow that course. But for him, it worked like a charm.
Yeah, he's one of a kind. You can't have a Marco Rubio. You can't have a Rick Perry. You can't have a Paul Ryan who comes in and says, I'm going to try to run the same playbook, Ted Cruz, as Donald Trump, because he is a one-of-a-kind individual. And listen, I think chapter 1 of the debrief book of this is the economic populist campaign that he ran in the Rust Belt, particularly focused on Ohio and Pennsylvania, talking about the matters, the wage issue matters, the trade issue matters that were so vitally important to those voters, to get those union white type voters to come across the aisle and say, we're with you.
Let's talk about Mississippi. As you both correctly predicted, Donald Trump did carry the state of Mississippi. What will a Trump presidency mean for this state?
Well, I did say last time you asked us, would a Trump presidency or a Clinton presidency be better for Mississippi? And I said, I think it's pretty easy to say a Trump one would, because where is the leadership of our party in Washington, D.C.? They're Republicans, particularly when you look and see what Roger Wicker just did. I mean, listen, he's the belle of the ball in the U.S. Senate right now. He's the guy who was able to guide the Senate, our Republican candidates to maintain the majority in the Senate. It's a big deal. He's developed a relationship with President.
We should point out that all of Mississippi's congressional delegation, including the lone Democrat, Benny Thompson, were all reelected to another term in Congress.
I think all pretty easily as well. Senator Cochran, of course, has 2 more years to be Appropriations Chairman. But listen, the big player here is Phil Bryant. Okay, our governor was one of the only, I shouldn't say only, but he was one of a handful of major statewide elected officials across the country who were out there doing whatever they could to help Donald Trump. Does that mean a cabinet position for Phil Bryant? I wouldn't be shocked. I really wouldn't. I have no idea what cabinet position, but I'm sure he's having conversations with the transition team for the Trump campaign about this. We'll see, and then that's good. It's good for Mississippi that our folks are being thought of like that.
With due respect to my good friend, who I have a lot of respect for, I don't think everyday Mississippians give a rip about whether or not Phil Bryant goes on to have some kind of neat Washington job. And I don't know that they care that Roger Wicker did something that's going to make people happy in the Senate cloakroom. I don't want to relitigate the election too much, but when you're talking about working class Mississippians and their bread and butter issues, we have no idea what kind of help they're going to get. The Paul Ryan budget doesn't offer it. We don't know what the Donald Trump budget is. I have no idea if we're going to get any relief when it comes to education, infrastructure, which is a huge issue, which is actually bringing some of our businesses and some of our small communities to a halt in Mississippi. So I think from a policy standpoint, this is absolute jambalaya. We don't know at this moment what we're going to end up with.
He did mention infrastructure last night, so that's one of the big projects that he wants to take on. But you're right, we don't know. But you know what we do know, and we've said this about Mississippi government, is it's in the hands of the Republicans now. The House, the Senate, and the White House. So it is the onus is on the shoulders of Republicans in Washington, D.C., including our own members that are up there and our new president-elect, to go get things done.
Trump also said during the campaign that on day one he would dismantle Obamacare. How might that affect Mississippi and health care in this state?
Well, I think that that's a pretty safe bet, that that'll be the first target for this new regime. And so I don't know what that looks like, Wilson, because that's going to have an effect on how the private markets restructure. If you take away some of the things that made Obamacare work, you're basically relying on private companies to enter markets. And in our market like Mississippi, we're just not that attractive to insurance companies. The truth is we don't have that many residents, and the risk is in some cases greater than the reward from a business model. And so the protections that come from things like Obamacare, which requires insurance options to be available in each area, that becomes a little bit more of a trick bag. I mean, now we go back to being on the business model scale, which means you're a CEO living in New York City, deciding about where you're going to write business, and do you want to write it in Mississippi? And that's been a tough question. I mean, you can ask homeowners along the coast how well that's going with State Farm, Nationwide, and others. I mean, it's been a tough slog to make us attractive to a vibrant insurance market. Also, you have people who didn't have insurance options that have gotten insurance for the first time, different types of preventative care. When you take that away, it's scary. I talked to a guy last night whose wife is expecting a child in April. Their policy runs out in March. That's scary. They don't know because there's no certainty about what comes next. And one of the critiques I've had about the anti-Obamacare crowd is, hey, I get it, you don't like it, but what's your proposal? What comes next? What are you going to fill it with? Because we all recognize we got an insurance crisis in America. So if you take down the solution that's on the table, how are you going to fill the gap? And can you get insurance companies to be as excited about that? Because they don't seem to want to do anything that doesn't serve their own bottom line.
Yeah, I don't exactly know what they're going to do with Obamacare. They're certainly going to try to replace it, and what will the system look like? I have no idea. Republicans like myself were never a fan of the mandate. aspect of Obamacare. Something's got to be done to make sure people with pre-existing conditions are covered. They're not going to go throw people who've got health insurance now. They're not going to just say, well, you're on your own. They'll come up with some kind of system that's going to allow for these people to be covered. But we need more choices. We need to find a way to sustain these rate increases. And I think, you know, we don't need Washington, D.C. trying to make personal decisions for people's health outcomes.
The president-elect has also talked a lot about immigration. We've talked about on this program the importance of foreign workers for Mississippi's agriculture industry. What might a Trump presidency, what effect might it have on immigration and thus the agriculture industry here in Mississippi?
Well, listen, I mean, obviously immigration was one of the key issues that he talked about, particularly in the primary. Didn't talk about it as much over the last 30 days, much more of a primary issue. We will see. I have to believe that in the first 2 years, I mean, look, there's a guaranteed 2-year period, just like it was under President Obama, his first 2 years, where the Republicans are going to be in control. Obviously, with President Obama, the first 2 years, Democrats were in control of all three branches of government. I said that wrong. Not all three branches of government, but the House, the Senate, and the White House. You know what I meant there. So we'll see. Immigration. They've got to come up with a system that's going to work. That's going to control the overflow. The flow of people that are just running across the border. And we'll see. That's been one of his big singular issues. But yes, you're right. I mean, there's an agriculture industry here in Mississippi that relies on those type workers. So those are balances that he and his ag, whoever's going to be his ag secretary, that could be a spot for Phil Bryant. And then Congress will have to come up with a plan. You know, one of the things that we do know about President-elect Trump is that he did write that book called Art of the Deal. He's not going to be against negotiating. I think we have got to give him some credit there. He took some pretty hard stances. I think this is true. He took some pretty hard stances in the primary and the general election, but I do believe when this guy gets into this, he's going to do some negotiating to get some things done.
Our differences make us great. The people of this country that come from other places, and of course we're a nation of immigrants, that difference makes us great. It's part of the fabric of our society. The anti-immigration crowd is a crowd that has a limited shelf life. It doesn't matter who they elect as president because the demographics are changing underneath their feet, and you can't over-legislate people. They're here now. Latino Americans are a part of this community. They're going to continue to be a part. They're going to play a vibrant role in our future, and you can't legislate them out. Yeah. And so I feel bad for people that cling on to these concepts about a wall and some things of that nature, because that's not where this country's going. It's not what our history is.
We just need a fair way for people who want a better life for their family to get into the country and to provide a service that is needed in our country, whether it's in the agriculture industry or other industries. We need a fair system. We need a fair process for that.
Well, and heck, they're doing legal medicine, they're everything.
Yeah, of course. We do not have that process right now. That is what I hope that President-elect Trump and our Republican House and Senate will work on a process and work on a bill that they can pass that will address that. And it is so difficult. That has to be one of the top three issues.
Well, you and I know the unicorns and cotton candy that you sell on the campaign trail gets a lot different when you actually have the responsibility.
It does.
He's going to have to work with different folks with their own ideas and with their own power over him. I mean, look, there's not a whole lot of independent power vested in this office. And the Senate is, look, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, a leading Republican senator, tweeted out yesterday that he didn't vote for Donald Trump. The Bush family told reporters they didn't vote for him. So he's not going to get a blank check out of this Senate. And we don't know a whole lot about where House leadership may be in a couple months. I mean, they may stay the same, but I think we can expect there to be pushback. And so that kind of gives me some comfort because I feel like that process works, and I feel like that process may help to regulate some of the things that are driving up the blood pressure of Democrats.
There'll definitively be some checks and balances within the Republican Party, but I think Mitch McConnell, who of course is the leader of the Senate, and Paul Ryan, who is Speaker, and I hope will continue to be Speaker, will understand President Trump sets the agenda. They can get in there and disagree about some different aspects and variables of the agenda, but this is his agenda.
Too soon. No, you're right.
Will President Trump truly be able to create jobs, as he has suggested, for American people?
I sure hope so. I mean, you know, I hope that he can, and I pray that he can. But we'll see. I mean, we don't know a lot about his economic policies. We just don't. Brandon said this. But listen, the guy's been a job creator his whole life, whether you agree with that or not, and to what degree he is. He's a businessman, okay? And he's created lots of jobs, thousands of jobs in the private sector. So I hope that he'll take that mentality to Washington, D.C. and working with Congress and, you know, set up different types of policies that will allow for job growth, and not just job growth, but higher wages. That's what I want to see as well.
It's not unemployment is down, it's underemployment.
Yeah.
It's folks not making enough money. It's folks not getting that paycheck to stretch as far as it needs to. I hope he's successful. I absolutely hope he's successful. There'll be nobody more pleased to see underemployment issues get resolved in places like where we live.
And I think that, I mean, look, I'm very optimistic that the guy knows what he's talking about on that. He's done it in the private sector. Just as I felt like in 2012, Mitt Romney would have been very good at that as well, because he's done it in the private sector. But I think Donald Trump will bring different types of ideas and will surround himself hopefully with the right people in the White House to work with Congress to get that done.
Austin Barbour, Brendan Jones, thank you both as always.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For more information on the presidential election, go to our website, mpbonline.org/issue. For now, we are out of time. We hope you'll join us again next week for another edition of At Issue. Good night.